Welcome to the new edition of the ABBA League magazine. The second round saw Cedevita play in Slovenia for the second time in a row, this time against Union Olimpija in Ljubljana. In a repeat of the last year's Final Four semi-final, Cibona hosted Crvena Zvezda. Edo Muric finally had his debut in the jersey of Partizan, and that against his former team of all, Krka Novo Mesto. Of course, at the end of the show, we will have shown you the best 5 actions of the round. We start with the news. Since both Dragan Milosavljević and Andrija Milutinović are still injured, Partizan has decided to bring in one of their own former players, Luka Bogdanović. The 29-year-old will have an open type of contract which will allow him to leave the club if a better offer arises. His former teammate Uroš Tripković was forced to retire early due to recurring injuries. He's only 28 and was 3 times ABBA League champion with Partizan and a silver medalist with Serbia at the Eurobasket 2009 in Poland. We start in Ljubljana. Olimpija had previously beaten Cibona prior to hosting the second team from Zagreb, Cedevita, who hadn't enjoyed a similar start, having lost to Krka in the opening round of the season. Cedevita still without their coach Jasmin Repeša, and this time also without their captain Roko Ukic, who had been injured in a game against Krka. They did take the first lead through Miro Bilan, who would eventually put together a double-double with 15 points and 10 rebounds, but Mirza Bigic would respond immediately by scoring the first 8 points for the hosts. Cedevita did react and took the lead by 17-15 when Ante Dilaš rounded up a run of 6 consecutive points for the visitors, who eventually won the quarter by 17-16. Cedevita's biggest lead of the game of 4 points came after 2 consecutive 3-pointers, the second of which courtesy of Fran Pilepic. But then Olimpija responded with a 11-2 run, rounded up by Mirza Bigic, who also drew a foul after this dunk. With that, they equaled their highest lead of 7, with Bigic ending the game on 11 points and 6 rebounds. Pilepic was the only one scoring from distance at the other end. In the last second of the period, he set the result of the first half of 37-32. Olimpija's first 6 points of the second half came from Hristo Nikolo, and with this alley-oop he also drew the crowd from their seats. He finished the game on 14 points and 5 rebounds. Again, Cedevita responded, this time through Ivan Ramljak, who scored twice in a row and closed the gap to 4 points, but that was the last time the visitors would come that near. Olimpija quickly led by 9 points, but Salin scored for 3, and then they were in front by double digits for the first time in the game when Halil Kanacevic made it 54-43. When Omic was successful, the lead had grown to 15 points, and that was also the difference come the end of the third quarter. It seemed the visitors would put together one last push at the start of the last period, as Olimpija would eventually need more than 3 minutes to score. But it turned out Cedevita would only manage to score 4 points in that period, and the home lead was restored to 13 when Markovic scored and was fouled in the process. The home team was in front by 14 points when Marko Marinovic scored his second 3-pointer. He ended the game with 9 points, but as many as 10 assists. There was still some hope left for the guests when Gordic closed the gap to 11 points with the second of their 2 consecutive 3-pointers. But Markovic really took things into his own hands in the finish of the game, scoring 5 of his 17 points altogether, and that without a single missed shot. Olimpija eventually won by 77-67, despite missing as many as 16 free throws. A very good start for the Dragons. 4,000 people turned up in Skopje to see their MZT fight it out with Zadar, who beat Igokea in the first round, while MZT had lost in overtime to Mega Vizura. This game also saw MZT's coach Zmago Sagadin feature against his former team. The first 4 points of the game were scored by MZT's Ivan Marinkovic. And for the visitors, it was their captain, Ive Ivanov, who opened the scoring, eventually finishing the game on 11 points and 5 rebounds. Then another 4 points from Marinkovic, who made it 8-2. The home team was quickly in front by 15 points when Zadar-born Vedran Morovic from MZT scored for 3 and rounded up a 13-0 run for his team. The first quarter ended with 23-9 when Domagoj Bošnjak managed to score for 3. The Dalmatians opened the second period better, scoring the first 6 points, 4 of which came from the American James Florence. He made it 23-15, but MZT quickly restored their 15-point lead as they replied with an 8-1 partial rounded up by Georgian Tsintzadze. The lead was as high as 18 points when Aleksandar Cvetkovic made it 36-18. Still, Zadar managed to get closer come the end of the half, with Florence closing the gap to 11 points after an 8-1 run of their own. The home team maintained their double-digit lead through most of the third period. It was 49-37 when the Canadian Owen Klassen scored, but generally Zadar did play better after the break. In spite of Florence's injury, they managed to put together a 7-1 run, which put them just 6 points behind when Henrik Širko made it 50-44. Josip Sobin, who ended the game with 12 points and 10 rebounds, said the result of the third period it was 52-46. The home team opened the last quarter really well as they managed to score the first 7 points. It was 59-46 when Marko Simonovski scored for 3. Aleksandar Cvetkovic played well, finishing the game with 16 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists and 3 steals. In the 33rd minute he made it 61-47. The Dalmatians couldn't get much closer till the end of the game, and MZT Skopje was able to secure their first win of the season, while Zadar registered their first defeat. In the end, it was 72-58. The game of the round was set in Zagreb, where the champion locked horns with the best team after the regular season last year. It was also a repeat of last year's semi-final of the Final Four tournament, which Cibona surprisingly won. They were forced to play without Filip Krušlin and Boris Barac. Crvena Zvezda was quick to announce their intent as they scored the first 6 points of the game, as it looked some time for the reigning champion to get going. Jure Lalic breaking the deadlock after 3 minutes. But the team from Belgrade wouldn't ease off, as they instantly replied with another 8 successive points as they rolled into an early double-digit lead after Williams made it 16-6. The German Mark Zierps rounded things up after 10 minutes of play when he made it 26-11. The home team's play was plagued with turnovers and bad defense, which the visitors readily took advantage of. By the time Stefan Jovic scored twice in a row, Zvezda already held a 19-point lead. Also by the 12th minute, Cibona's first-choice playmaker Jarell Blasingame had already collected 3 fouls, and coach Rimac then left him on the bench for the remainder of the game. When Nikola Kalinic scored 2 of his 13 altogether, Crvena Zvezda already led by 36-13. Jure Lalic was probably the only one fighting it out with the visitors. He then managed to close the gap again to 19 points. The last to score in the first half was Luka Mitrovic, as he made it 51-28 for Crvena Zvezda. It didn't get much better for the reigning champion in the second half. Mark Zierps quickly scored 7 of his 15 altogether, and the visitors were in front by 25 points when the German made it 61-36. Then the home captain Marin Rozic made sure the lead wouldn't grow further still, as he contributed 8 of Cibona's 14 points in that period. But that didn't stop Marcus Williams to score 12 of his 19 altogether in the third period alone. That run also included 3 three-pointers, and the lead was again astronomical, 27 points to the good. 78-47 to Crvena Zvezda after 30 minutes of play. When Boban Marjanovic scored 6 in a row, Crvena Zvezda was again in front by 30. One of 3 players in the home ranks to break into double digits was Ivan Siriščević, but his points wouldn't announce anything better for the hosts. The last quarter was a mere formality as it opened some space for the younger players to gain some experience, and Cibona in the end managed to soften the blow only slightly as the game finished with 88-64 to Crvena Zvezda. Already the second defeat of the season for the reigning champion, while Crvena Zvezda registered back-to-back convincing wins at the start of this season. It was a second home game for Szolnok and a chance to make it right in front of their own crowd as the Hungarians lost the opening match of the season to Partizan. This time the opponent was the newcomer in the league Metalac from Valjevo, who had also lost its opening match to Budućnost. The home team was quick off the line as they scored the first 6 points of the game, Stefan Sinovic making it 6-0 with the second of the 3-pointers. George Majstorovic then broke the deadlock for Metalac. He was eventually their best scorer, but with only 8 points. There were bright moments for the visitors at the start of the match as they managed to put together an 8-2 run and equal the score to 12, courtesy of Nemanja Todorovic. A bit later they were even ahead, but the period still ended with Szolnok in front with 20-17. The hosts grabbed their first double-digit lead in the second quarter through David Vojvoda, 27-17, after another partial, this time 9-1. The result after 20 minutes of play was 35-21, set by Jones, and that was also the home team's biggest advantage so far. David Vojvoda was eventually the game's highest scorer with 16 points, as he also scored first in the second half, and the lead was 17. After 3 quarters of play, Szolnok was already in front by 20 points, another highest lead set by Stefan Sinovic. The game was irreversibly decided in the 36th minute when Marko Brkic scored for 3 and set the benchmark to 21 points. Metalac managed to soften the blow towards the end of the game, mostly through Nikola Otašević. It ended with 67-51. Metalac didn't have a best of games. They missed as many as 13 free throws and also got outjumped by 47 rebounds to 27. Igokea hosted Budućnost, who had never won in Laktaši before. They scored the first points of the game through Darko Planinic, and for the home team it was Duško Bunic. And it turned out to be the only successful shot of the first quarter of 12 attempts for Igokea. When Omar Cook scored for 3 for the first time, the visitors led by 10-4. Almost all the points scored from Budućnost in that period were easy baskets from counter-attacks. After Dašic's points, they were in front by 9, and at the end of the first quarter, the result was 18-8. Jonathan Jones then opened the second period well, scoring the first 6 points, and Igokea came within 4 points. And that was followed by Milosevic's 3, and the home team managed to close the gap to just a point after a 9-0 run. But then the guests replied by scoring the next 10 points, 4 of which came from Bojan Subotic, and Budućnost was again in front by 11. Igokea again came closer when Bunic scored 6 points in a row. It was the American Will Sheehy who scored last in the first half, which ended with Budućnost in front by 9. It was 38-29. Igokea wouldn't just stop trying. Again, Duško Bunic with a run of 8 consecutive points for the home team, and the deficit was cut to just 4. And only a bit later, when George Drenovac scored 2 out of his 12 altogether, to 3 points when it was 46-43. But that was as close as they've gotten, as Budućnost then scored the next 6 points, and when the American James Reynolds was successful from distance, the result was 51-43. After 30 minutes of play, the visitors held the lead of 54-47. They started the last period even more determined by scoring the first 8 points. 4 came from Vitkovac and the other 4 from Subotic, the best scorer that night. 19 points for him in the end. From that point, Igokea's struggle seemed to be coming to an end, and if there were any doubts left, they were all cast away by Šehovic's 3 from the 37th minute, when a 14-point lead was restored for Budućnost. Igokea had only managed to score twice from far, and that from as many as 16 attempts, so it was clear that Budućnost would win in Laktaši for the first time ever. 70-62, the final score. The newcomer to the league, Levski from Sofia, played their first domestic game in the league, having previously lost to Crvena Zvezda. The opponent was Mega Vizura, who had managed to beat MZT Skopje in overtime in the opening match of the season. The historic first basket in the new competition for Levski was scored by Miljan Pupovic, and for the guests it was Rade Zagoras who opened the scoring. He ended the game on 11 points. But Levski really got off to a good start, grabbing an early lead of 10-2 when Dimitrov managed to score the first three-pointer for Levski, and Mega's coach Dan Milojevic was forced to take an early timeout. That didn't prevent Pavlin Ivanov from scoring and securing a first double-digit lead for the home team, after which Mega Vizura did start to respond, and after Jaramaz's 3, the lead was cut to 7. But that was followed by a 7-1 run from Levski as Alexander Simeonov set a new highest lead of the game of 13 points. The home team in front after the first 10 minutes by 25-15. First minutes of the second period, Mega did play slightly better as Nemanja Krstic managed to score his first three-pointer and close the gap to just 5. But Levski was quick to react, and not before long they were 12 points to the good again, when Pavel Ivanov this time made it 36-23 with a 3. Levski was ahead by 14 when Zacharyov scored twice in a row. And then Brandon Heath took things into his own hands and was the main force behind another 9-0 run in which he had scored and passed nicely. Come the end of the half, the hosts nurtured a huge lead of 19 points. It was 57-38 after the first half. At the beginning of the third period, the lead was increased to 21 points when Levski's Serbian Miljan Pupovic scored 2 out of his 14 altogether, but then they eased off a bit, which was a lifeline for Mega Vizura, and they seized that opportunity by scoring the next 8 points. By the end of the quarter, they have managed to cut the deficit to under 10 points when Nikola Jokic finally managed to score from far, not being able to do so in the previous 5 attempts. The visitors even had the chance to close the gap further still, but they lost the ball and presented the hosts with an opportunity to close the quarter, which Karamfilo took good advantage of and scored for 3, which meant Levski has restored the 10-point lead right at the end of the third period. Then they managed to score the first 3 points from the last quarter, and life was again easier for the home team as they got away to a 13-point lead through Simeonov. Marila was having a good game, ending it on 19 points and 5 rebounds eventually. When he did the same in the next offense, Levski's lead had been cut to 5 points, but then came the crucial three-pointer from Zachario at the other end, which had put the home team back to an 8-point lead. 98-89 in the end, with Levski shooting 59% from the field for the first win in the Adriatic Elite. More than 6,000 people turned up in the Pioneer Hall for the first domestic game of the season for Partizan, and also to see Edo Muric feature for the first time, and that against his old club Krka of all. The home team was forced to play without Milosavljevic and Milutinovic, and the visitors without Nebojša Joksimovic. Matej Rojc was the first to score in this match, and for Partizan it was Edo Muric who would eventually finish the game as the best scorer for the home team with 22 points to his name. But Krka was relaxed and opened up a 6-point lead through Erion Castrati. Partizan was quick to balance things out, but Krka was still able to finish the quarter ahead when Malcolm Armstead scored twice in a row and set the result of the first 10 minutes of 17-15. When Mirko Mulalic scored his first three-pointer, Krka equaled their highest lead of 6 points. And when Malcolm Armstead did the same, it seemed Krka would win this first half. But it was Partizan who was able to score the next 7 points, and just 12 seconds before the end of the half took the minimal lead when Mihailo Andrić scored for distance. 31 points apiece after the first 20 minutes of play, when Jasmin Hukic scored only once from the free throw line. The third period began with a total offensive from the home team, mostly through Gagic and Muric, who took them to a 9-point lead. Then Gagic was given his fourth foul, and the next 8 points then went to Krka, at which point Partizan's coach Duško Vujošević had completely lost it and was expelled from the game when he got 2 technical fouls a minute before the end of the third period. Then Armstead managed to score in the last second, which meant Krka had a 2-point lead going into the last 10 minutes of the game. In the last period, Edo Murić scored the first 7 points for Partizan and managed to equal the score for the last time in the game when it was 56-56. As then Malcolm Armstead again took the responsibility and soon Krka was in front by 62-58. But Murić was also having a game of his ABA League career with 13 points to his name in the end. Here he put Krka 6 points to the good. Still, Partizan wouldn't just roll over, and when Gagic scored, the lead was reduced to just 2 points. But that was followed by another basket from Armstead, who was again the best scorer of the round, this time with 26 points. The last nail in Partizan's coffin came from Jasmin Hukic, as the home team had lost all of its chances to get back in the game. 68-64 in the end for that memorable Krka win in Belgrade, their second in the entire history against Partizan and a first in the Serbian capital against them. So the reigning champion lost their second successive game of the season and a second win of the season too for Zvezda. MZT would never let it go against Zadar, and there's also a second straight defeat for the last year's finalist Cedevita, Olimpija gaining its second win of their expense. Budućnost finally successful in Laktaši, the same for Krka in Belgrade, and of course there is that historic first ABA League win for Levski Sofia. Crvena Zvezda still holds first place, while Olimpija, Krka and Budućnost are also the remaining unbeaten teams. Still without a win are Igokea, Metalac and somewhat strangely both finalists from last year. The MVP of the second round is Crvena Zvezda's American Marcus Williams with a playing index of 29. In the 21 minutes he played in the win against Cibona, he managed to score 19 points and add to that 6 rebounds and as many as 11 assists. He is our most valuable player of the round. And now let's take a look which 5 actions were picked by our team for this edition of the show. Number 5, the action from Crvena Zvezda, Jenkins assisting nicely for Luka Mitrovic. This dunk is our number 5. At number 4 we had this amazing pass from Marko Marinovic to Blaž Makovic. At number 3 we go to Laktaši. It's a nice team effort from Budućnost, attracted by Bojan Subotic in the end. He was of course the best scorer of that game, and this is the best action from that game. Number 2, this is first official basket for Edo Murić, and it was a nice one as well for his new team, Partizan Belgrade. And the best action from the round, it was this alley-oop. Again, the assistant was Marko Marinovic, Hristo Nikolov, making sure these are 2 new points for Olimpija, and this is the best action of the round. The third round will kick off on Saturday at 4 p.m. in Hungary, where Szolnok will be hosting a still winless Igokea, followed by 2 of the strongest encounters of the round when Cedevita will chase its first win of the season at home against Partizan, and then Crvena Zvezda and Olimpija will lock horns in Belgrade, both teams of course undefeated. The round will end with Budućnost taking on MZT Skopje. And that's all for today. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, it's bye-bye from us.